Normally, you have a chief guest from the government, and then everything goes up and down. But very happy. I'm very happy today. So, friends, I wish to extend a very warm welcome on a relatively cool evening in Ahmedabad. This doesn't happen much in Ahmedabad. We have 10 to 11 months of summer, Sabine, and we have 1.5 months where winter threatens to come but never comes. That's our city. And just like the weather, the people here, I hope you've been finding them as warm as the weather. Very nice. So, welcome all of you. I'll give 1.5 to 2 minutes of introductory remarks. Then I will introduce her. I will introduce Praveen, and I will acknowledge the presence of the better half of Sabine here. And then we will request Sabine to speak for about 30 minutes. And for 30 minutes, we will have a combined moderated discussion between Praveen and Sabine, as well as all of us and the panel together. So altogether, we will spend an hour. It's about 6:35, around 7:40 or so. We will call it a day. So once again, with a welcome note of welcome to all of you. I particularly find today's topic extremely interesting and timely from one point of view, and that is we have entered a new economic environment, and we see this actually playing out every day, whether it's the newspaper, whether it's an educational institution, whether it's in business where I am, and all the rest of the institutions and the organizations are actually going through changes that are happening every day, and we have a new environment. It's definitely more complex, relatively more uncertain, sometimes even globally now getting more and more relevant, and frequently disrupted in our traditional ways of thinking. As it is, we had a lot of issues to begin with, but now I think with this changing environment, we really require something that was missing all along, and that is the extended stakeholder engagement. Now, the principal stakeholder in making policy in India remains the government, and it is all about public policy. Large private corporations also have policies, but of course, they are limited to their own organizations. And the public policy space that we have today is now markedly led by people who are not really trained for developing policy in a complex environment. And the cracks are there in the wall. We are seeing it in how they develop. And the outstanding example is make a beautiful policy after 1 year of so-called consultation, you put it into the market, and everyone then says, oh, this is very bad, this can't work. And this has been happening again and again. And now, just like the climate change events, the disruption to successful policy planning and implementation has also increased as much as it is going forward. And I therefore find this today's context and today's discussion an important dimension of what we are going to really face, and how I hope Sabine will be able to shine her light on some of these aspects that bring out some of these things that we are grappling with. To my mind, I've been involved with policy for roughly about 5 decades on both sides of the table. And basically, we have four important stakeholders and four minor stakeholders in the field of policy development and design in India. The four major ones are: one is the government itself, because it's public policy. They are the executor, the maker, the monitoring of the policy, the course correction, the iteration, and they are primarily responsible for the successful outcome of the policy that they are designing. The second set of stakeholders are all the beneficiaries, people like you, people like me, citizens. The third stakeholder is the industry. And the example I want to cite is about the telecom policy, where the government makes a telecom policy, then there is the people who provide the telecom service. We all get affected as the citizens. And there is a fourth dimension, which is the academics. The academics have a very important role to play in terms of giving the framework, the context, the history, and very importantly, the research that is required to drive innovation in policy making. So these are the four major policy that we have had to contend with. And I find that both at the central and at the state level, we would really like to develop a new framework in which to develop. So a lot of us are working in good governance, a group also based out of AMA, and also in several other civil society business. And what we have shared is our collective wisdom is that any good idea that needs to come to fruition and to work sustainability, there are 7 dimensions that you have to look at. The first is that it should be politically acceptable. Now, this is one dimension where the academics are exceptionally weak. and the politicians are very good at only theirs and not the other ends. The second area is that the idea has to be socially desirable. The third is that it has to be technologically feasible. The fourth is it has to be financially viable. The fifth is it has to be administratively doable. The sixth is that it has to be judicially tenable and has to be legal. And the last is that emotionally people should be able to relate to the policy that is being planned, and also find a certain amount of acceptability in going forward. So these seven aspects are really the key areas that I think are now the new modem of development in Indian policy making. And I'm sure that we now expect Sabine to actually throw some light in this respect in terms of how else and how better, how differently can it be done in order to get the best out of what we all want to do, that is better governance and a better system that actually works for all stakeholders. It's my proud privilege to introduce now Professor Sabine Junginge. Sorry, 1 minute. Juninga. Yes, because I wrote it in Hindi. She's a renowned academic and a practitioner in the field of design and policy innovation. She's a professor in communication design and vice chancellor's fellow at Northumbria University School of Design, Newcastle, UK. She also serves as a research fellow at the Hertie School in Germany. Professor Juninge has made significant contributions to the field of design-driven organizational change, public sector innovation, and policy making. She is the co-founder of the Swiss Service Design Network and Politics for Tomorrow, two initiatives dedicated to promoting the role of design in governance and public administration. Her advisory roles include serving on the Scientific Advisory Board of the European Forum ALPBAC or ALPBAC, and as a member of GovLab Austria. She's also a part of a group supporting the EU's Joint Research Center Policy Lab, which explores innovative policy approaches within Europe. A PhD graduate from Carnegie Mellon University, her dissertation, Change in the Making, examined organizational change through human-centered product development. Professor Juninge is the author of the widely acclaimed book, Transforming Public Services by Design, Routledge 2016 publication, which explores the application of design principles to reimagine governance and public services. Her work bridges academia and practice, emphasizing the transformative potential of design to create impactful policies, impactful organizations, and impactful services that address people's needs and improve societal well-being. We are also lucky to have a special guest tonight, Professor Sabine's husband, Professor Mark Hollerberg. Thank you, sir. And we welcome both of you to Ahmedabad, and we welcome both of you to AMA. I also want to recognize here the presence of Mr. Divyesh Radia, past chairman, past president of AMA, and also one of the foundation pillars. I would, 1 second, Praveen Nahar also, he's a good friend. He's the former director of the National Institute of Design, Ahmedabad, and its campuses in Gandhinagar and Bengaluru. A faculty member in product design at NID since 2002. He holds a master's in industrial design from IIT Delhi, my alma mater too, and a postgraduate certification in sustainable design from Delft, University of Technology, Netherlands. With over 23 years of experience in design education, consultancy, and research, he has held leadership roles in various NID departments, including international programs, research and publications, and the Design Vision Center, of which he is very proud. He has significantly contributed to the transportation and automobile design discipline and led strategic projects for Indian Railways, Amul, and state craft industries. Welcome, Dr. Praveen Nahar. It's a pleasure to have you here. So now we give the memento. We have a system, Sabine, here to give you a memento before you speak. The idea is to encourage you to do the right things. This is a very nice, it's a temple gift. Thank you. I need to go to the temple. I was just switching off my mobile. Oh. This is for you. This is for you. This is for your wife. So, with these words, may I invite you, Sabine, to give your talk, and we are all anxiously waiting for the next 30 minutes or so, where you can share your ideas about what you want to communicate with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Come.
I can just switch the computers. There we go. And this, we tested it before, so it should be fine. And we go full view. There we go. Wonderful. That should work, right? Yes. Okay, do you need my microphone? Yes.
Ready?
We're good?
That puts me in an awkward position.
Well, let me first of all thank you, Sunil, and the Ahmedabad Management Association for having me and for giving me the opportunity to meet you and to talk with you about something that is very, very dear to me. And I will already be able to pick up on what you said, Sunil, because you mentioned, of course, what we know as the quadruple helix,
Yes.
which is bringing together people from academia, business, and civil society and industry. Thank you. Business, of course, management and everyone together, because we know that when we have complex problems, we need everyone on board. Yes. And then what I also find very interesting in your introduction, you already made the case for design in very clear terms. All of the product designers and designer, you were like listening to and said like, yes. So we have a problem and we have to establish new criteria for how we go about addressing that. And you mentioned all of the criteria, the stakeholders, the systems, the technical systems, the legal frameworks, all of that is up in the open. But now what do we do? And I think this is maybe where we can talk a little bit more about how design can be envisioned in this. A lot of people think of design as, you know, making a car or a scarf or something, but maybe we can then have a new mindset about how we can utilize and employ design thinking, design methods, design practices in addressing these challenges. So maybe just a very brief thing about me, and I know some of you have been at the systems design conferences. I was honored to speak there at the sixth conference event, and everything that really marks my work is in that drawing, which I really find very interesting. You see systems design approaches, you see change in design. Let me just start from the very basics of design, so we have a common ground as we move on in the next couple of minutes. Design invites, enables, and engages us, every one of us, to inquire into the human experiences, to allow us to invent new possibilities for human action that we can then use to integrate and transform systems with humans in them. See, that's a bit of the problem on this planet. You know, it's not just machines and AI. It's actually, we are here too, humans, and of course non-humans like animals and the plants and everything. But it's us. We are in this together, and we need to work with these systems, and we need to make these work for us. Someone who was here in Ahmedabad a long time ago, George Nelson, a famous American designer, has identified the problem of organizations for design very early on in 76. Yeah, he said, you know, that this is what the problem is for design, not the materials per se, not the cars, not the things, but it's about organizations. We need to understand that organizations are the key issue that we need to deal with, and that organizations and systems are actually affecting how we think and behave as individuals, and that this is a conditioning process. And I'm very much in favor of Richard McKeon, who actually looks at communication as an opportunity to to influence the conditions of design. So now we're talking not only about designing and what we're doing to design, but we're actually going one step back to say, like, what happens before we even design? What are our principles? What are our assumptions? What are our biases? What are our, where do we come from? And that's a little bit what I want to talk about today. Now, what I find very interesting, most of you are familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals. And many of you have probably used one or two boxes of the little color squares. But what's very interesting to me is very few mention box 16. And it is box 16 when we talk about peace, justice, and strong institutions. And it is this box 16 combined with the partnerships for the goals that we can achieve the other goals. You will not achieve any one of the other goals if you ignore 16 and 17. And I find it very intriguing that we have paid very little attention to that. For me, this is what I call design in government. And when I talk about design in government, I like to cite Jocelyn Bourgon from Canada. She was the first public service, the head of public services in Canada, female head of public services in Canada. And when we especially in design also engage with the public service, and sometimes from the technology side too, it's often about cost and efficiency. But we should never forget, she says, that this is about the relationship that we have with the state and the citizens, and that the citizens per se are not cost drivers of government services, but that instead, when we do it well, this is a public value creator for society. And that is where design can come in my view, and where I will talk to you about. Design has a role in public management and policy making because these human interactions that we are able to influence and give shape to and promote are exactly the ones that are the relationships that frame the relationship between a person and state, citizen and government. And how we go about designing, that is where I go this one step before we even design. It's like a reflection on, and this is what you mentioned, when you are in this new space and everything is open, you cannot do it as you used to do it.
Exactly.
But then how do you understand what you're doing? And this is very interesting in design. We find very few people who are designing actually articulate what they're doing. And because they don't do that, they also don't understand what else they could be doing or how differently they could be doing it. So I mentioned already Richard McKeon, who I very much adore, and for his work on the UNESCO, and also for his ability to understand that what we need to do is to move beyond discussion, to move beyond dispute and controversy, but then to allow to the generation for new possible actions and agreements. And that is what we do when we influence the conditions, when we go that step before we even design, when we start reviewing, like, is it that we do. How many designers are in here? It's mostly designers. How many managers? How many public sector workers? All right. Okay. So then just to let you in on a little bit of design theoretic introduction here. Many of you understand design clearly as we have learned it. A brochure is a visual communication, is graphic design. We call that a first order problem of communication. Then we have the second order, which is physical things, the mass production of objects, cars, glasses, things. The third order is when we get into like service systems and more intangible design challenges. That also gets us into strategic planning. And finally, when we have the fourth order, that is about transforming thinking, integrating systems, and changing the way that these systems interact with each other. And that's when you get really into organizational change. This is my interpretation of Richard Buchanan's 4 orders, but I find it very helpful to understand that when we talk about policy making and policy implementation, we're clearly towards the third and fourth order. Now, that doesn't mean that the first and second order have no role in it. Of course, we need communications. Of course, we need corporate design. Of course, we need products and tangible objects, but the aim and the focus on the problem is on this transforming the system itself and integrating it. So one of the things that I have done to help people understand their own design practices, so that's much of my work, is by opening up a landscape where they can hopefully find themselves. And this is a matrix I developed originally for policymakers in Tel Aviv who were interested in understanding participatory government. And I thought, like, how do I possibly talk to policymakers about design and help them reflect on their current design practice? And then it became clear that I needed to unfold this way that I found in my research is typical for organizations to go about designing. And I've done it for the public organization, but you will all understand this just as much holds for private business as well. So when you see this matrix, it says like by the organization, designed by the organization, designed with the organization, or designed for the organization. And in the other the dimension, it's about designed for citizens, with citizens, and by citizens. And when you take this and as a matrix, and there are many different boxes in between, but these are kind of like the core 9 ones that I would argue for. You can see in the very bottom left, this is where we find most of the design happening, especially in the public sector, but unfortunately still also in business. This is like people inside the organization have a very good idea, a very good understanding, and very good intentions. And then they, with their own knowledge of designing and their own knowledge and expertise, begin to design something. And you mentioned it actually, Sunil, and then they hand it over to someone. And that's the problem. That's the problem. Because despite their best efforts, they don't know much about the needs, what it looks on the ground, what the problem feels on the ground, and what services are needed to implement something new. And that is where we move into these areas, designing with citizens and organizations, those more colorful boxes, and designing by organizations, or even designing by citizens. It's this kind of different relationship that we're having. And then you can also approach it to reflect on your way. How do you go about designing? By understanding what an organization has to do. Every organization, I call it the 4 core elements of the organization, or 4 core activities, sorry. Every organization has to manage. Every organization has to design, because why? If you cannot offer something of value and relevance to someone else, you might as well stop being an organization. That's your, so you have to design and develop something. As an organization, you also have to change all the time. And why is that? Because whenever you design, and we just decided that agreed that we have to design, whenever you design, you must change something. You simply cannot design anything without changing something. Now, you know, I'm wearing things like that, scarf for talks like that, because, you know, a change can be very superficial. This is a scarf right now. Oh, sorry. Now it's maybe not a scarf, but a head cover. I changed it. Somebody who didn't see me with a scarf would think like it was always a head cover. So we can change very, very simple things. But even if we just make very simple change, whenever we design, we have to make a change. Color, shape, behavior, use, perception, and this is where we have an opportunity also to change the thinking about something. And we also have to organize in an organization. So all of this is connected and interlinked. And the question is, how do we manage to allow for design not to be deterministic? Deterministic means like we already know what we need. We need another app. Well, okay. What if we don't know what we need? What if we don't know, because everything is in flux right now? We have different technology, we have a different environmental regulation, we have different futures, we have different knowledge. I mean, everything is new. So how do we manage in a way that allows for the emergence in the design process for something new to come out. That's where it goes into innovation. And then how do we manage this in a process so that the change can take place? And how do we then lead this through the organization in a change, in organizational systemic kind of change, that this can take hold? And how do we do that in a way so we still innovate around people? Because in the end of the day, organizations are for people, by people, for people. Can be a government, by people, for people, but every organization in the end has to provide value and relevance to people. So it's always the same in the end. So when it comes to policies, and by the way, you probably, like I told you, I wasn't kidding, you have to stop me. I have no idea what the time is right now. But when it comes to policies, it's very important to understand that design can take many different roles. That's important for designers to understand, but it's also important for those who are working in the policy field and in the policy implementation and policy making end. On the one hand, very simplistic and very, what was the first role, I would argue, for design in this context is like to communicate what already existed. So somebody made a policy, it was already implemented, but now it had to be communicated in ways that people understand it exists and maybe educate people about what the purpose is and what they need to do. But designers can also actively implement existing policies. Because, you know, the thing is, when you have a policy, at first it's just like a law. It's like a couple of letters and words on paper. And unless you have the appropriate services and products, it never ever gets enacted. So there's an active role for design to implement existing policies through the development of appropriate products and services here. Because especially from a human-centered design, we're working with people, we're observing, we're engaging, we're doing user research. We learn so much about issues of the problems of current policies, as well as the need for potential new policies. That is knowledge that can be fed back into the system, into the policy-making cycle by designers. And finally, and this is really where I am most fond of, and I think we have a massive opportunity to contribute, is exactly where you just said. We need to design differently. And that means like we can actually initiate new policy approaches. We can initiate new policy opportunities, integrating policy making and policy implementation, which, you know, in the classic policy cycle, which is being revised, by the way, in the field of policy because they realize there's a problem. But it used to be that the policymakers here would see a problem, identify a problem, and they would huddle. And then they would say, like, what's the problem? Okay, how can we formulate that? And then once they had a formulation of the policy, they would then just throw it over. Welcome to the public organization, the policy implementers. You had no idea what they were doing up front. Maybe you heard something, but there was certainly no consideration what your resources are, what your needs are, what your knowledge is. And here you are, and you have to implement it. And it was really considered a separate act of design. So we can already, with that as designers, come in and say, like, wait a second, your design approach, excuse my language, sucks. So if we develop products like that, we know they fail. So why would we expect that policies that are developed that way succeed? So here we come in as designers and already revamp the whole approach. We also can reflect a little bit on where we have design sitting in the organization and what the organization wants from design, what the designers want from design, and what that means. And so I developed this, I call them the bubbles. Some people call them the eyeballs. But it's like the idea to just do a mental exercise of like, where am I? If the organization is the black circle and design thinking or innovation, whatever you want to call it, is the little orange cycle, circle, then you can say like, okay, if I have innovation happen in the very left orange circle, it's outside of the organization. There could be a lot of innovation. Often it's the innovation lab, by the way, because the innovation lab is so protected from the organization, because they say like, oh no, you can't, have it in the organization because the organization will kill everything that's innovative. But then there's a chance that it really never helps to reframe the organization. When you have it somewhere in the organization, then often it's stuck in R&D or marketing, but not really touched to strategic visions, missions, or and new frameworks for how to go about the future of the organization. Same when it's central. It could be like very strong. We always look at Apple actually in this case, because Apple does have a very strong central design language and understanding. But in the end of the day, Apple is still an engineering company, and it has not really woven all this through the organization. And the irony, of course, is that when I work with public organizations, that's where I find it even more integral, because people understand that there is no product, but that they need to kind of work in this integrated design thinking way throughout. They have logistical issues because they're in silos and everything, but the recognition is there. And this is, by the way, also you can read those in any direction. For example, when you have a startup company, they are most likely on design integral for organizational development and change, because the people, the product, and the organization is everything is together. They see each other. The organization is the three people in the garage. The product is there, and only when they grow, they begin to do the backwards kind of journey. But again, this is a question of like understanding how to ask yourself, how do we go about designing? What do we think is designable? What can be designed? What do we want to design? Where do we want to have the influence? Where not? It's just interesting to see how this kind of particular work has become quite popular in the interaction design communities and UX. And it has been used by the city of Eindhoven when they applied for the World Capital of Design, because they said like, we wanted to move in a different way and envision our design approach for the city more integral rather than just external. And then we have also, it's been very nice to see this being picked up by the UK Nesta Foundation, which did exactly what I hoped people would do. They didn't just accept the 4 archetypical areas that I suggested, but they started to play with it, because of course there are many different ways that can happen. As a matter of fact, even in one organization, when you have a complex organization, you might have different variations in different parts. So let's just recap a little bit why we're even talking about that and how design kicks in this area. As a human-centered designer, I start with the people, and people in the organizations, but also, of course, people, citizens, members of the public. And members of the public, first and foremost, engage with policies through services. You will never experience a policy, but you do experience the service that is intended to make it happen. And as you can see, services express the values and they communicate what people are supposed to do, experience with government. So that means that they have a crucial role, and yet in most policy cycles, services were not mentioned. The organization is the very place and location where these services are being developed, where the principles and methods of design determine what kind of services are coming out of it. But of course, the organization itself depends on policies and laws, because the policies have already created like a fence for the organization in which it must work to come up with these services for the public. And so that is a connection that that is important to understand. And also important is to understand that throughout that, the values that are expressed through our design thinking and through this will actually be the ones that foster justice, dignity, and can support the pluralistic and democratic levels. And so this is all where we have a role. So I'm not showing you the traditional policy cycle that I actually totally redesigned. But let me just say that the traditional policy cycle in the policy world is a linear sequence of 5 iterations. So you start with the identification of a policy need, you go into policy formulation, then you go into policy implementation, and then you go into evaluation. I think I'm missing one of them. But the point is that there is really no mention of people and there's no mention of service. And what I argue for is that the moment we have a policy intent, we need to start to work, and now gets into the quadruple helix. We need to go and identify who do we need in the boat to work on this policy intent, to understand what the service needs are and what the actual people needs are. And then when we move from policy intent to policy making, we also need to go back to service and people. But it could also mean that we need to have, that's where the stakeholders come in. It's not just citizens or members of public. It's also like who are the people who we need at this stage to get this next step done. And then when we move from policy making to policy implementation, again, we need to bring in people and bring them together. And design has a very wonderful way of bringing diverse groups of people together, engaging them, moving, I call it opening up the gray zone, the gray space. When people come with a position of black or white, through our methods, we can span open a gray zone between black and white. And it is within that gray zone of black and white that comes back to Richard McKeon, where we go beyond dispute, beyond controversy, and beyond debate, and we begin to have a space where we can come into action. It's a space where we can experiment, where we can pilot, where we can develop new things and test and explore. So this is what's happening in the International Design and Government group. This is a group that was founded about 7 years ago and has now grown to almost 5,000 people internationally. So these are people who are either designers working in government or who are people in government, like civil servants, who have become interested or engaged in working with design approaches to improve public services and to connect to policy levels. We see it at the EU Policy Lab. What you can see here is, this is a group of people. So the EU Policy Lab is at the Joint Research Center in Brussels, and they have made it their responsibility to bring together people from these different areas to help them inform and explore opportunities to work on future fit policies. One of the issues that came up in October, the last meeting was in November, I'm sorry. And I was very glad because that's one of my key issues right now too. I want to throw that out here. We have at the EU level now a commissioner who is responsible for intergenerational justice. And when we talk about future fit and all these problems in business, in civil society, academia, and I always forget one, government, of course. Today, intergenerational solutions are, in my view, the path forward. Because if you talk about retirement, you pit the young against the old. If you talk about climate, you pit the young against the old. If you talk about technology, you pit the young against the old. And I think that we need to break that open. And I think when we do user research in the future, I think one of our key focus should be on learning how to bring different generations from different backgrounds together, because then we can maybe we can reduce the tensions, and we can come up with solutions that are supported and implementable. So this is I'm doing one more example from the UK government, which is the digital government service. And you can see they're also concerned with policy. They're sitting in Whitehall in London, and they're very much concerned again with the digitalization and AI for public services, and for that also what policies are needed. And yeah, that's another opportunity where the service and the designers are coming in. And like I said, I can just leave it at that and say thank you very much.
Hello. Hello. Ajay? Hello. Hello. Okay. Wow, that was a treat. For those of us who wanted a bird's eye view about the process that is involved in going to the next step in designing, I think it was a wonderful journey. Thank you so much, Sabina. May I now request Praveen, if you can ask a few questions and invite a few questions and take it further.
Yeah, thank you, Sabina. It was a nice, wonderful presentation. As usual, I think attended almost like third or fourth time of different settings, from 10 years back till today. And thanks for coming to Ahmedabad and talking to us in a outside design school setting, but a lot of design community I can see here. I think it has been nice to see how the design is discussed in different orders, from design as a tangible outcome, to design as a strategic playing a strategic role, to looking at how design goes into the policy. But within that you design for the government to design ideas, I think, which she talked about, how do you communicate policies and things like that, but also then going forward and seeing that design sensibilities are introduced within the government system, which brings the idea of design to the next level, and then sort of also facilitating policy making itself, and which are more citizen centricity is built into the policy making, and and also various forms of implementation of the policy, at different levels, depending on what policy we are talking about. So, I just wanted to ask a couple of things, and I think we'll also leave it to the audience. So, how do you see the global acceptance of this approach, design thinking and policy making, evolving, in coming times, and how it has been there? So, a lot of times, you have, fantastic, design thinking, sessions and ideas which comes up, and a lot of people jump onto it. But when it comes to taking it to the next level, and of implementation, especially the stakeholders, who are supposed to take them forward and build it up. And so, how do you see it has been happening and where it is moving?
Yeah. Thank you, first of all, Praveen. And yes, so I've been working on this for almost 20 years now, maybe the better part of 20 years, actually, more than that. And so I can say that I see an absolute uptake on the understanding that design and designers can bring something to that. Now, I'm always careful because I don't want to divide the world in designers and non-designers. And so I think one of the key things to keep in mind, especially for designers, when they enter into this world of government and policy making, but any organization for that matter, is they don't enter into a void of design. So I'm a bit tired of designers who go like and say like, oh yeah, and I brought design into the organization. If you tell me that, I think you don't understand design, because the organization itself has been designed. and there is a lot of design going on already. So what I'm saying is there is a better understanding today, also in organizations and government, that they are designing, and so there is a bigger foundation to have this conversation, but also
Yes.
to enter into changing design practices.
Yeah.
And so, when you look at the design in government movement, which is an association that was completely self-organized and self-established, and now they have 5,000 members after 7 years, you do understand that there is something happening, and it's moving forward.
What are the other examples of those design labs? From I heard of policy hack labs and
Yeah.
people actually demystifying these things, and also setting up of labs. How does you proceed, and who takes the call?
Yes.
And yeah,
So I'm glad you're asking that question. So there's a whole thing about innovation labs, public sector innovation labs. And they were extremely popular, let's say 5 years ago, just before Corona. And then everybody got tired of them, like with business innovation labs, so it's a hype and then it goes down. But there's a lot of good work and we see a lot of, I would call them innovation initiatives, not necessarily labs,
yes,
within different government departments and on the regional, national, and local level. And you have a lot of city labs right now where this work is developed and advanced, and where on the local level there's such an intimacy and a directness of experiences and understanding of problems, and they're beginning to understand how they can feed up to the policy level.
yes,
And so we're seeing that development as well. When it comes to innovation labs, you have to go back to my bubbles.
yes,
Because if the innovation lab is just on the side, you can innovate everything and make no change. Only if you can find a way to bring that innovation into the organization and have that conversation going. And that takes years.
yes,
Like I work with the Brazilian government for almost 10 years. I'm in touch with the Swiss municipality for 8 years. And I think that this is where we can also rearrange our relationships and our collaborations with business and government and industry and research, because I think that design research has a lot of possibilities to develop capabilities in the public sector and to bring all the other players together based on their ability to maintain a long-term relationship.
yeah, definitely. No, I was also looking at because there's a lot of design practitioners, academic students here, and if at all, if they have to practice in this space or engage with this space, rather while they are practicing something else. So, what are the tools and methods and approaches which you have experienced or seen, which which actually bring you up? I think I'm sure a lot of people do something as they move in their profession, but it would be interesting to see if the narratives and conversations of this kind evolve.
So I think I would recommend any design student interested in that area today to do an internship in a public organization. Number one, could be at the policy level, could be just at a local municipality, but get an understanding of what the public sector looks from the inside out. And then, when you have that, the key for really working together with members of the public sector is to develop a relationship, because you have to understand that the public sector is pummeled, is pushed all the time by a range of management consultancies who constantly come in to critique, to cut, they're fearful of external people coming in for a reason. That's not always a good reason, but they have experiences that aren't good. And so it will take time to develop a relationship to help the people that you want to work with to understand that what you're doing is not to come in to critique and tell them what else they're doing wrong, but that you're interested in helping solve their problems. And once that's happening, you can begin to start pilot studies you can begin to enter into, experiments, and that's where the relationship then starts to take off.
See, one of the thing in India, I think some of the states have initiated the chief ministers fellowships, and they bring in a lot of young people to work on a lot of public projects. And it may be interesting to see, there's a design fellowships and, built under various topics and, building up this area, actually.
I think, for example, we all live in Ahmedabad, and none of us have ever had a say as to where the next road is going. The government decides, the municipal corporation says, this is the TP scheme. We are all famous with the town planning scheme. They superimpose a set of marketplaces, roads, and entertainment areas, and everything. And sometimes they forget large elements of what people require. For example, we have a chronic problem of people who want to eat outside. So restaurants spring up in all kinds of places where they were supposed to be regular commercial retail outlets. And then you have a parking problem because people gather in the evenings. This is a problem all of us have seen every day. But we don't have a choice to decide where would we like to go and eat. If it's a small hillock and then you have a wonderful view of the city, that's a much better place than next to a bridge where there is a heavy amount of traffic and pollution. So the space that is required for people to enter, fellowships of students to enter, citizens group to enter into conversations doesn't exist.
So,
But what happens is the builders, they work with the government to carve out large plots of land for development. And suddenly you find in a very nice residential colony, there is a mall coming up next door, and you are shocked, but you can do nothing. So this fellowship is a drop in the ocean. It's a good step. It allows some amount of interaction. But it is, again, what in the 4 pictures that she showed, is external to the main policy making in the government. They think that they can give inputs to the government by asking these people to go and mix with the people and bring feedback to them. But the people themselves are not allowed to go and talk to the government to tell them. Even that is, again, not even within the government, it is still separate. But the real engagement takes place when you start exposing them, developing people to make sure they come up to the level for being articulate enough to address the people. That space is not there.
Yeah, so we need starting somewhere. Starting point. Recently we had an experience with a mayor's fellowship we established with Kochi, and Kochi Mayor's Fellowship, and we had 15 students from NID spending 6 months in Kochi. The idea was not to beautify the city through design, but also with a clear agenda that how do you demystify design, how do you find opportunities with fellow citizens and councillors, and try and see how cities could be, finding various opportunities for intervention, whether they are tangible using research through design, act of design, but not doing design interventions directly. But I think finding all those opportunities which nobody sees. How do you make cities more inclusive or climate resilient, or so many invisible ideas of design which were explored. I think some thing came across, but I think a lot of expectation from the councillors was, making something, doing very quickly and, making it more visible. I think it's a slow process, but I think if we do it for a few years, I think it might come up. So, so we'll open it to people. So Dinesh would like to.
Any thoughts on redesigning of democracy itself? It has failed us. Currently it is no more governance for the people, by the people. A large segment is ignored. So if you're bringing design into governance, how do we correct these things?
So obviously that's a task none of us could possibly do. And I have my husband sitting here who's an expert in political science who reminds me every time that democracy is not a singular thing, but democracy has very many different faces and very different, expressions and forms. Having said so, and I'm not sure if that's a good answer, but I will share it. So I have worked with people in government who had no legitimacy, no authority, and no official power to do something. And yet in Brazil, in the basement of the Congress, they went down there, they found a room that nobody cared about. It was full of boxes with nobody knew what. They cleaned it out, they did not ask for permission, and they put a hacker lab in it. And those were civil servants who were like in the force for 25 years. So exactly those people that a lot of business people say they are not innovative. And they ran it. And in the US, in the United States, it's called the Office of Personnel Management. So it's the HR group that is responsible for every single federal employee in any state in the US. They went one step further. They went in the basement under the basement. And they found a room with boxes full of printed forms from 1970. They were in that room in 2011. And they figured nobody's missed those forms since 1970. So maybe we can just kick them out. They cleaned out that room and they started a design lab or a design group in there. They did not ask for permission. They did not have any much resources. They just did it. And then it became a more formalized and more accepted approach. So I guess, and I see that over and over again. When I worked in Brazil the first time, I was there to help them integrate their innovation network in the government. So they realized in different ministries they already had some labs and innovation groups, but they were all single solo fighters. And the ministry that was responsible for them felt that they didn't support them enough, but also didn't know enough about what's going on. And so they wanted to have an integrated innovation network. And when I started to work with this group, they would tell me that, we can't do anything in this office. If I move the printer and the printer doesn't work afterwards, it's my fault. I can't do anything. And yet in the end, they moved things around and they created and they invented. And that innovation group is still alive 10 years later. So it's also a bit about taking the courage and doing it. And so
That's not governance.
it's right. It's not governance, but it's activism. But it's like it's not in vain. It's not in vain. And if the other path doesn't work, then that is opening an avenue to start something.
So here, I just want to add, if these kind of meetings actually they are places where ideas are born. If you feel very passionate about this, would you like to form a small group of people, eclectic mix from different walks of life? And AMA as an organization supports these kind of activities. We don't have to go to the basement of the Parliament House. We'll give you a proper room with a projector and light. And Divyesh here is one fellow who has really built AMA. We would love to take an initiative in this with you and a group of people to look at the options. That's how it all begins. A small group of dedicated people who are willing, open-minded, and are willing to innovate and talk even to the so-called us and them, to break the us and them into we, is what the whole process is all about. Otherwise, the solutions are all there.
Yes.
The challenge is not in what you want to do, is how you want to do. And that is the importance of Sabine's talk today, is the entire approach is that of recreating an attitude, an atmosphere of cooperation and co-creation instead of we and them and always separate. So if you are willing to take the call, we are willing at AMA to back you.
And I want to build on that because that is wonderful. I mean, if this is the outcome of today's talk, I'm so pleased I'm here.
We'll ask you to come to review the progress.
I will come back. I will come back. I promise. But what I was going to say is, you said like they're the builders. It's very interesting. There's probably someone in the building industry who also feels this is wrong. And it could be the child of a builder who actually realizes this is not how we want to live.
Our builders' children, they drive fast cars on bridges. Is it true or not?
But you know what I'm talking about, right? It's like there is movement across these different groups and people, and it takes one person to open up and to get an in the other side and to open that gray space that I was talking about. That's what you need. Once you have the gray space, then you can.
need to put your foot in the door.
Yes.
Even if it gets crushed.
Yeah.
But you need to move, you know. Otherwise, we'll be here talking the same thing again. Seriously. There is a question. Yeah, there is a question.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not from academic side. I'm purely from business. I'm a consultant to business, family business houses. So till now in India, as a business community, we used to design products which are good for business, which can make money, and good for the consumers. But of late, this thinking also has crept in that it should be good for the business, good for the consumers, and doing less harm to the planet, to the surroundings, so that we can survive in long run. So, but this agenda is at a very nascent stage. Very few organizations who can afford it can do it. Government also is not very keen pushing this agenda, because I come from a background of construction industry, which is very high in producing carbon dioxide in this atmosphere. And we have got a target for 2030 that 47% carbon emission should be reduced from the.
Question. Please ask
So,
the question.
What is your take? How to push this agenda, because it is good for society at the large?
So you're talking about the environmental agenda per se?
Yes.
It's a good question. Again, I don't probably have a good answer for that, but what I can share is there's a limit for how governments can ignore these issues. And you can see it in China, because when in China the pollution gets too bad, people get unruly, and it gets, again, they're not happy with government, and it goes against government. And when people cannot breathe, they will act. And so this is not a very good answer in a proactive.
To create a crisis.
But the crisis is there, and again, maybe the solution is intergenerational, because again, maybe this is where we're working across the generations for the young people who have so much more at stake, because we know that in 20 years the water is higher, the rain is worse, the cold and the heat are worse, but our children, they'll still be alive, and we can go through. So maybe that's a way to.
Sabine, I'm a member of the team that goes to negotiate every year in COP, and I can share with you the dismal progress we make year after year, and we have talked intergeneration right since 1986 on this issue. It has never been us and them. It becomes us and them when you ask them to pay the money for the pollution. Then it becomes a divide. Otherwise, there is no disagreement in terms of, yes, we must build a better earth. Nobody denies. But the devil is in the detail now. How the hell is it going to happen? So, at the macro level, there's agreement. There's no country that says, except Trump, there's no country that says that climate change is not happening. And yet we see such abysmal small progress and a large amount of $500 million expended in one single meeting in November. And then there are 4 or 5 meetings of each of the committees in different parts of the world throughout. It's an enormous amount but no design thinking, no innovation thinking, no way to crack the divide that has happened. Is you just go and repeat the same thing again and again and again, and people are losing interest. We really need a design approach to how to solve the climate. It's a very valid question. We need a new approach, but where is the space? Where is the willingness to start talking? Let's take last 2 or 3 questions, and in 5 minutes. Yes, lady. The first lady from the audience. Yes. Who else? Who else wants to speak? Please. Okay. There are two people here. Okay. So we'll take the mic there.
So, hi, I'm Srinija and I'm from SDM NID Gandhinagar, Strategic Design Management. And post my bachelor's in NIFT, I did pursue UPSC, and after which I'm here. During the time that I was pursuing UPSC for about 3 years, uh, I people used to often question me, "You're a designer, but why are you here?" Yeah, and aiming for even getting into public policy, because I could see that we could operate design at the fourth order, and that is why I was pursuing UPSC, right? But there are people; these are people who are potential policy makers in the circle, and they couldn't even understand why I was there. And we are, and this is at my generation, right? And that is one part of the story. And we did a short project with a Indian Forest Service officer in Chandrapur. She's somebody who understood that she couldn't understand that she doesn't know design, and that's why she roped us in. But she also looks at design operating in the first order. So people are there in the policy making who understand that design is required, but they see the role of design in the first order. But design can actually make a difference if it operates only in the fourth order. So even people who are already there and understanding design, they are only looking at it at the base level. How do we get there? So we understand that design can do it, but what about the other person? It's very difficult to convince them. Even if when I was talking to my peers during UPSC, they couldn't understand what I'm talking. Like I'm saying, like design thinking, it's more about design thinking and how do you apply it. But they couldn't understand it because they don't know design thinking, and I can't prove it to them unless I get an opportunity, or I can't even show them at that point. So how do you make them understand?
Yeah.
No, no.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's all collective responsibility of all of us to actually look at and understand and how to communicate actually different orders of design, and also try and do maybe those what are those the student parliaments. So there are those mock parliaments which are being done, and like that we'll have to do and see how that works. Actually, some part of the work I think which people do in different programs and within the system oriented design project which people do, but I think there is a very important component of how do you communicate, how do you go. But I know that there's a creative bureaucracy festival in Germany, and I think you're also part of that. And there I was told that over the years actually that they found that design thinking and those kind of things really bring some understanding of to people, and they really enjoy doing it. But I think how do you then take the call and first action? So now they are actually working with sociologists and cognitive neurologists to actually get to the point that how the actions happen and where things can move. I don't know how
Yeah.
you would like to.
I was actually going to mention the Pune Public Policy Festival, because the Creative Bureaucracy Festival is in Berlin, and it's been now running for the 5th year, talking about the efforts within bureaucracy to come up with better approaches from services through organizational change through the policy level, to make this more impactful and meaningful. And the Pune Public Policy Festival is actually one of the reasons why I'm here right now, because that was happening on the 10th and 11th of January in Pune. It was the second year that the festival was running, and it's the first time that design was on the panel. Praveen and I were invited to give a talk on policy and design. The problem there is a little bit like the problem here. Most of the people who show up are designers, not the policymakers and not the public servants. So what does that mean? It's been my effort ever since I worked on this to engage with training schools for public service and policymaking. And I think this is the real leverage. And I can see it also in Brazil, for example. That is the Escola Nacional Administrativa, and they work on it, and they have Genova, and they are doing it. And so you have to, otherwise it becomes this complete Sisyphus work. Every time a designer goes into a public sector challenge, and the public sector side, public servants and the policymakers are all trained in the old. It's not working. So we need to break that open.
So I have a request to you. Will you conduct a half-a-day seminar in AMA on this topic of bringing public policy people and designers together?
Yeah, why not?
So
Entire
rise to the occasion, because
I think
this is
the-
how
the-
things happen.
the group from SDM, and I think
You can
and
bring
the
your
faculty
friends from
students,
Pune.
yeah.
And there is a Sardar Patel Institute of Public Policy down this road.
Yeah.
The venue will be there. We'll bring the new people who are joining the bureaucracy. That's where they train. That's where the first batch is trained there. So that's something that's a concrete step towards realizing the goal. But you need to take the initiative. You understand both sides. You are frustrated about it, and you sound passionate.
Can you can we
Can you
give a
Yeah.
mic to the next person there?
There are two other people out
She
there.
wanted
Two,
to,
the men, the gentleman at, yeah, right at the back, and then there is someone in the middle in the t-shirt, isn't it? Yeah, just raise your hand so that's the second mic. After that. Okay, we'll come back.
Good evening, and it's great to see design thinking has been discussed at a policy level. I'm so happy because we are discussing the design thinking at the product level and the process level, but it's very good. My name is Manoj Soni. I have done some study on the design thinking, and I'm a technology consultant. So my question is related to the technology and the process. Sabina, my question is to you that have any design thinking process has been done on e-waste and it has been implemented somewhere and some outcome, if it is any case study, if you would like to share.
I'm not exactly sure what you mean with the design thinking approach, because is it the IDEO 5 bubbles, or and that's just a method, and that's being used in increments in the different innovation labs. But it's so specific to a problem that it applies mostly, for example, like in the government digital services in Whitehall in London. When you have a concrete challenge of implementation, you can go after that with either the agile method or the design thinking method. But when you still have to understand what it is that you want to do, and when you talk about technology, we're talking about GovTech. There is a group called GovTech. You're probably familiar with them. And they have very much committed this year in January to put people in the focus and not technology, to avoid the pitfalls of, just creating more and more digital services without understanding what the actual problems are. In that case, it's not the design thinking per se that you need. You need a broader base again to understand what needs to be. And then once you have a concrete case, you can use the design thinking approach. So, yeah.
I'd like to direct you to two people in Ahmedabad who are doing this. One is Pranav Pandya, just make a note of it somewhere, and the other is Amit Parikh. These two people are working in e-waste, and they have a lot of technology solutions that they are offering to all our large companies.
But design communities around the world, actually, this is the end of the pipe sort of thing. You created a waste and now you're trying to do something about it. But I think, how do you not to create a waste? How do you look at strategies which can go into circularity or upcycling? Design for repair, and right to repair is the policy now. How that actually becomes a real in action, and also. Also product as a service, so that you don't own products, but you sort of those things, so that things go in a circular loops and those kind of things. Also, this democratization of manufacturing, which is happening, and there are a lot of examples around the world where people are addressing exactly this. There's a case study called Fairphone, which is you make a phone which actually reduces e-waste, but also it's a modular phone which can constantly be upgraded and changed. It doesn't use most toxic materials and the materials which actually produces child labor in Africa and all those kind of things. So there are initiatives, people are actually there are groups which are responding, like Amul case study. There are those kind of things. So I think there are a lot of while you approach through a address the waste at the end of the pipe, but I think at the design level, I think there are a lot of perspectives and ideas. Yes. Yeah.
If you talk to these two people, they are both in design. They are not in waste clearances.
Perfect.
They are both in designing of waste systems, which they are offering to companies to reduce. I'll give you a concrete example of what has worked. Every battery cell that is wasted, once it is used, if you go to Chroma and put it inside, the lithium from that and cadmium is extracted and is sent to a central place. And we are short of lithium in India. And China has cornered a large amount of lithium processing. This is a concrete solution that today we are generating and collecting lithium from all over Ahmedabad in Chroma stalls. You just go, there is a bin there, you throw your old batteries and you have done your good
I think,
duty every day.
Yeah.
I think
There are
that's a direct response. Is that what you wanted to say for the?
Sarah. Huh?
Something to add on the e-waste thing, because I have been working on product circularity and working on reusing the e-waste as my graduation project in Hyderabad. So, hi, I'm Sarah. I'm fifth year product design student from NID. So what I have to add on to that is, even in the company level, as in, for example, how I intervened in the company was pitching the idea of circularity of the product. So that is also a step towards working on the e-waste
There are two
retrieval.
more questions related to policy and design. I think. Josh.
t-shirt, he has been waiting for long.
Yeah, please.
Hi, I'm Natesh Aravind. I'm also SDM Masters in Design. So, like, my question kind of is connected with the question that Srinija asked as well. It's about when we talk about co-creation, especially with government bodies and let's say politicians or civil servants. Generally, again, they are not sensitized in design. So when we sit with them to co-create, what is the kind of role that we have to take to involve them to get like a holistic solution at the end? Is it something like a facilitator where you're going to aggregate everyone's viewpoints? Are you going to, at the end of the day, do the design after collecting everyone's viewpoints? Like, or is it like a mix of?
Catch a low hanging fruit, give them a concrete solution. Design is a process to arrive at a solution. Don't share the process with them. First of all, attract them by giving them a solution which they have around their neck, which is hanging. You give them a solution to a problem that is burning, and then you have your footway and gateway to enter for doing all the other changes. So first help them solve a problem, whether it is municipal waste, whether it is vehicular pollution, whether it is industrial pollution, whether it is groundwater contamination. If you are looking at environment, take one problem, find a concrete solution that is better, and go with that. They will listen to you, and then you have your credibility.
I would probably beg to disagree a little bit. I mean, it's not wrong at all, but at the same time, I think the best service that one can do in the beginning is to help these people understand if they even address the right problem. And so if you come too fast with a solution, you're giving them a solution to a problem that is maybe not the right problem.
Maybe, but it gives
And
an
so-
entry into government.
If they understand, and they will value understanding the real problem, and they will value you for helping them clarify that problem. So with your user research, with your understanding of the system, with your understanding of the requirements, that will be a way. Just a quick example, so this comes from Marcus Steinberg from the Helsinki Design Group, but they found at some point that a municipality wanted to make sure that the citizens go back to the swimming pool. They noticed that citizens would no longer go to the swimming pool, and they thought that was not good. So then they looked at the swimming pool, the municipality did, and they said like, oh, it needs to be renovated, it needs to be upgraded and all that. And that's what they wanted to do. But when then the Helsinki Design Group came in, they realized the bus schedule had changed. And the bus schedule no longer matched the opening times of the swimming pool. So you can spend a lot of money in the solution of making the swimming pool pretty, but you won't solve the problem. That's what that's about.
I'm also from SDM, and I'm Sanika, and my background is from architecture, and I've studied a little bit of urban design also. So my question is that design thinking and design is quite experimental, and the thing, like, many a times it could be experimental, and to actually implement it and execute it at a scale where it is not tested. So how do you actually work on it?
Yes, you can talk about prototyping. So first of all, it's not just design that's experimental. People in business, everyone is experimental. When you start up, it's experimental. When you introduce a new product, it's experimental. So don't let yourself be told that design is experimental and something special in that, or introduces more risks. So it's not true. The second thing is the way that we work with is with increments, for example, iterative prototyping, pilots, a pilot project that is small, that is used to do iterative prototyping and testing at the same time. That's one of the things that marks design, that we don't just develop something and then throw it out in a focus group and say like, oh, do you like it? Should we paint it red? No, we start from from scratch and from the beginning. That's why the circle with the policy intent, you need to bring in these different stakeholders, and you need to bring them into comment, to test, to give you critique right away. And that's how you reduce the risk, and that's also how you increase the buy-in, and that's how you increase the opportunities for making it right. And maybe it's not perfect, but you avoid the biggest risks.
Shall we take one more?
Yeah, sure, one more.
It's finally got inspired to us.
So I really appreciate your.
Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Parth. Same, I'm from STM department from NID.
SDM, we must visit. Yeah. Something about.
But you are wearing a T-shirt of DICT also.
Representing,
Make sure that they have to come today.
yeah, representing both institutes. So, yeah, so I really appreciate your the articulation of role of design in policy, the 4 pointers, communication, implementation. So like, it really puts things in perspective, and I want to articulate or communicate it, because this happened once when I was explaining what is strategic design and how can it aid in policy making. I just wanted you to elaborate a bit more on the 4th pointer, the initiating new policy opportunities and new policy approaches.
So one thing that I didn't show, I told you I could talk forever, is a project I just was leading for the Swiss National Science Foundation. It was a interdisciplinary research project over 4 years, which looked into voice assistants, people experiences, practices, and routines. The challenge for us was to say like, wait a second, if everyone has a voice assistant in their home, what do people do with it? And what does it do to people? And that was, first of all, like a very, like I said, interdisciplinary research. And then we did in-home studies, qualitative in-home studies. We analyzed it. We, indexed coded the interviews and everything. And based from the insights that we got there, we started speculative design. Speculative design, for those who don't know, it means like you start to build prototypes to inspire people and conversations. We went one step further. We call them provo-types, provoking prototypes, because we wanted to trigger reactions. And from this triggering the reactions, we were able to then understand potential policy needs. Now you get into anticipating policy opportunities. They also clarified these prototypes that we then had. We were able to work or conduct a workshop with the WHO and people from the EU Joint Research Policy Lab, actually the larger Foresight group, to understand how could such prototyping and this approach help policymakers engage better with these new technologies. Because it turns out that policymakers are actually not that different from people at home. The only difference is we don't expect people at home to make policies to steer the future, but the people in policy making, we expect them to make the laws that protect us, that guide us, and everything. But they haven't learned much more about the technologies. They don't know much more about Alexa than someone sitting at home. Yeah. So then we started to explore how that works, and this was a very different approach. And it's been for me like a first in that direction, but it was interesting to see how that can work.
One of our graduate, I think if you know Anab Jain, she's from Ahmedabad. She runs a company called Superflux in London, and she works in the domain of speculative design. And a lot of her work, and if you go to her website, Superflux website, you'll find that they are engaging with the governments and the policy and multiple stakeholders. But I think majorly, and also they are making a lot of prototyping, making films, actually very compelling film. Largely, they work between the idea of technology and society and how any new technologies are going to impact different kinds of things and what kind of decisions and conversations have to be done when it will go. So there's something around drone, and some projects they directly now work with the governments to figure out their future investment plans and how they look at. So one of the projects she is doing is around the investments for renewable energy or future of energy in the UAE government of UAE. Actually, they create an environment where people can actually smell the air which is going to be in the city 50 years ahead of time, and how do you decide what kind of actions you have to take. And they work directly with parliamentarians and bureaucrats and politicians to create that kind of a environment to do it.
In this debate on first order, second order, and fourth order design. Now, if you look at the mobile phone, how it has transformed our lives. First as a fantastic solution, and now we don't know whether it's a solution or a problem. You know, it's tending more towards a problem. But how the degree to bringing change into our lives, this has done more than any policy or any law or any of those things. So actual change is brought about by this first order or second order, design. Your
This is
policy
more than a
has
first
to
order
be-
and second order. This is a third order.
it has to be translated into a physical construction. It has to be translated into,
Something tangible.
Something people touch, something
people
people
touch,
use.
people come in
But
contact.
you're
with.
speaking exactly what I say. You experience the service, not the policy. This is a service in the end, and it's brought to you through an appropriate product. That's exactly what that is all about. Yeah.
So,
I want to thank. Oh, yes, I'm happy to thank.
but I think.
Sorry, you want to say last word?
No, not the last word, but I think 23 years back when I came to Ahmedabad, I think from NIT myself, Balram, and I think many designers and architects across the city, they came and attended 2-3 days workshop on something called universal design, and accessible cities and infrastructure, and how do you design for that. And a lot of people actually made a commitment that they will actually work for it, and there was a publication came out of that is the Universal Access Handbook, which is for public spaces to be redesigned for the accessibility and inclusiveness, and your bathrooms and any of your offices to be designed. A lot of people volunteered, and there was a group which came out of that, which actually went and audited public spaces and new upcoming projects of the government, including this HART and other places. And something like this conversations or a workshop, I think that it came out. So what you proposed, I think you should really, with the AMA and the groups here, maybe there's a now Association of Designers of India and the Alumni Association. There is a student groups, this GSAC and the thing and all that, and also so many design institutions and public policy institutions. And this is the common ground actually. And you also have some Center for Governance, Wagh Bakri Center for Governance. So we'll actually pull out resources and facilitate something here.
Yes. So first of all, we are going to hold responses. Shriji and Dinesh. You are the two bakras for today. Give them a round of applause and please encourage them to follow their passion. So Dinesh, you need to form a group within a week, and Shriji, you need to lay a foundation of a half-day program. Take Praveen's help because he's just been to Pune. He knows a lot of people. You know a lot of people. I'll bring in the government. You bring in the thinkers. You know, the executors and the thinkers, and we'll do a half day. And we won't do a webinar or a seminar. We'll do a round table, and we'll not give everybody mics. Everybody is free to speak in a structured way. We will explore the subject together about the potential and take it forward. So these are the two commitments that you need. And if you please supervise each other that the other fellow is working. You are not wasting your time alone. So friends, we must thank Sabine for provoking us into a discussion, into an informality, which is so essential for creativity and for learning. I really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. And thank you, Mark, for coming and listening to her carefully. I mean, quite surprising after so many years, but well done. Thank you, friends, for spending this evening with us. I think it's been rewarding in its own way. It began as a very abstract notion, which only meant for only designers, and then it became more and more concrete as we went through the whole thing. And now I think we have some tangible initiatives. So wish you a good day. Wish you happy Uttarayan tomorrow. Happy kite flying. And then when we see you next time when these two people invite us together. Thank you.